not to say that like the other things don't exist, but what if they find a virus first? You know, is NASA going to find, if NASA found it, this is a great question for this debate. If NASA found a virus that's never been seen before, if they found a virus on Mars tomorrow, would they say there's life on Mars? Like, life is evolution. There's no evolution.
Well, there you go. You just agreed with me. You agreed with me.
There's no life. No. Hold on.
That's it. We can end the video here. You said life is evolution. Viruses evolve. You just agreed with me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. That's it. We'll see you next week.
I really want to increase the level of scientific discourse. What's that mean? Well, it means introducing you, the viewer, to actual science discussions that don't happen anywhere else. I never see actually scientists debating or discussing with another scientist complex views on TV or in the media or in the movies. And what is portrayed, though, is this weird cult-like club where if you don't believe a certain thing, then you're not an actual scientist. And that's not how it works. Science is about how you think about something, not what you think about. It's about looking at an idea and your thought process and testing that hypothesis, and that's debated all the time. How to do that? Why you're doing that? Why are you analyzing it that way? So what I want to kind of do here is peel back the curtain a little bit and show you what actually happens when scientists debate other scientists on a topic that you might not care or know about, that even people care about, but it's about whether viruses are alive or not. I happen to believe that viruses are living, and that is not the mainstream scientific viewpoint. But I think we had a really good discussion with one of my best friends, Frank, and I think I learned so much in this conversation. It was so interesting, and I hope that you learn something and you see how fun science can be. So thank you so much for watching, and here it is. Hi everyone, I'm here joined today with my good friend Frank, and we're going to talk about
Hello.
hey man, we're going to talk about whether or not viruses are living, and kind of show that scientists are skeptical and have debates all the time, and that's totally normal and a good part of the process. Do you think that's right, Frank? You think that science has a lot of debate about subjects and stuff like that?
I mean, that's what science is to me, is constant debate and trying to either prove someone else wrong or prove yourself right. That's kind of the core of it.
Yeah, I think that there's like a popular misconception that there's like a hegemony with science, where it's just like you have to have a certain view, and if you don't have that view, you're never going to be able to have your views expressed.
No, I mean, even like within the same lab, people are always debating and contesting each other over like really, really tiny ideas. And that works its way up through the whole scientific community, where you get, you'll hear different universities or countries or, institutions debating against each other, but it happens at the smallest level within science.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think it's everyone's constantly asking what are you doing this for? Why you did this? Why are you observing this and not that? And it's just kind of like a healthy thing. And I think what people don't see is like how much people, how the debate goes beyond just like inside the lab, right? Like people will like go to social hours, and because people are such nerds about this and we love the idea and the subject, it's just kind of like there's all these conversations and debates and kind of always like are learning through that way that I don't think that the normal people or people that aren't scientists get to see commonly.
Yeah, well, cheers to that, because you know what, the best conversations that I've had with other scientists, and whether it be at schools or conferences, is always over drinks, right? Because you sit down, you spend all day, and you might have a conversation with each other over the water cooler or passing in the hallway about something, but It's a lot better and a lot more free form, and better ideas come to you when you're sitting down at a bar or you meet someone at a conference and you've had a couple drinks and you start getting excited about the stuff that you've been passionate about and been researching. And that's when you can really start, figuring out, the differences in ideologies that you might have, or what to do next to maybe improve an experiment or something.
Yeah.
But those are the points that am always most excited about. Like I've sat through a lot of conferences where you're just listening to lectures hour and hour and on end, but it's actually the dinners or the happy hours afterwards where you're like, cool, let's go have a drink and let's get into that and let's actually talk about that. Like, wait, what were you saying about that one thing? And I've never heard of that, or like, I don't agree with that. And you actually get an opportunity to like engage with that person versus just sitting there and having them talk at you, where like maybe you can ask one polite question from the audience or something like that. You're not going to have a 10-minute debate in front of everybody at a conference or something, right? You're going to do it afterwards,
Exactly.
And that's where, that's where I think really, the best parts of that community come out, and a lot of I think the best ideas originate from.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's where I do a lot of my learning and stuff too. It's like it's so cool, like seeing someone that's my favorite is like not knowing that a subject exists, and then like seeing how far deep they are in that subject, and you're like,
Right.
wow, like that's incredible. Like it's so cool. You can just see the hard work that they did and the diligence and stuff, the due diligence that they did. So today though, we're going to be debating whether or not viruses are real. So we should state that the scientific community, or as it right now the taxonomy is, viruses are not included on the tree of life. I believe that they should be included on the tree of life, and you're saying that they should not be, correct?
I thought that they were technically included on the Tree of Life, but they're still, yes, I'm taking the point that they're not living. So for the listeners here, this is a conversation that the host and I have talked about for a very long time here, and we're finally getting it on tape. But yeah, I'm going to be taking the point of view, and it's the one that I believe in, and that is that technically speaking, viruses are not living.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at it on the Wikipedia here, and there's virus is a submicroscopic infectious agent that replicates only inside the living cells of an organism. So I don't think that they would call it living. Life properties in microbiology, but I love this. I read when I was reading this. Organisms at the edge of life.
That's what it is. It's like it's just one step removed from what is living, in my opinion.
Allegedly. Okay, so I got 5 points that I want to go through, since I'm the one that's proposing this, and
Certainly.
against what people are stating is real. So I feel like the onus is on me to actually give my points, and we can talk about them.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
hear it.
All right. So I'm going to start off with my weakest point, and then we're going to start going up to the one that's the deal breaker and that you can't refute.
All right. Perfect. Okay.
Okay. So we're in a pandemic right now, and it
Mhm.
feels like we are fighting a living organism, because
Mhm.
we got something that an enemy, quote unquote, that changes quickly. It's evading detection. It
Mhm.
feels like we're in like this constant war against a living thing, like as if we were in a ground combat or like a war scenario. These
Right.
so what do you think about that?
I think that's a good analogy. It's kind of like because yeah, it's moving, it's changing. It's unpredictable in that regard.
Exactly.
But so is the thunderstorm.
It's different though, because it's going through evolution, and this is my biggest key point, and this is why I think actually viruses are living, is that they
Wait. I thought we were starting with your smallest point.
okay,
Is this your
okay, well,
biggest key
okay,
point?
okay, all right, that's fine. No, all these governing things are all around the same idea, is that they evolve. They have genomes that evolve, and
Yeah, I think
that's why it feels like it's it's mutating. The spike proteins are gaining away, or not trying to evade, but you know what I mean, trying to um,
So if you want to jump to the evolution question, we can jump to the evolution question because that is probably the strongest case for is it alive or not, right?
okay.
Do you want to jump to that question?
Uh, okay. Well, that was actually my second point.
Those are
So-
second. Those are the second one. Well, to your first point,
okay. Okay. Yeah.
it really does. It's interesting because it's like all of these questions are going to come back to how do you define something that's living, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like on some scale, I say that the universe is living, right?
Hmm.
It's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, but we're talking about a biological. For this specific conversation, we're talking about in terms of biology, is it living, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And because you could have something that's like an entity that feels like it's alive, right? Like a movement, right? So you could have a social movement and you could say this is a really, this movement is alive right now, right? It's progressing, it's evolving, it's changing. I use the example of a thunderstorm that came to the top of my head because it just felt like, yeah, like there's, a big entity out there that's something that's coming towards you, it's moving, it's threatening, it's changing, but in terms of speaking biologically, does that mean it's living? That's a different question. So,
Yeah.
we got to be careful. We have to define the scope that we're working in and how we define something that is living, because that could be used in so many different ways. So, I like that you posed it that way, and that it seems like it's like it is an entity, it is a threat, it's an enemy, it's something that you can pinpoint, and it is something that's changing and progressing. But I think there's a lot of examples, and this is just to refute this one specific point. I think there's a lot of examples of things that have kind of just said that you could also describe in the same manner that aren't biologically living.
Hmm. But you can evade a thunderstorm pretty well. You see that it's coming, and it's not going to change other than like the direction that it's not going to, like, the thunderstorm isn't going to become like a sandstorm because that's just what the
Okay,
environment imposes.
well, how about a hurricane, right? So, like when we have a hurricane coming, first it's a depression, then it's a tropical storm.
Mm.
Maybe it's going to be a hurricane.
It's
Maybe it's
always
going
going
to
to be a
hit the
hurricane,
pan.
though.
Maybe it's going to hit the panhandle. Maybe it's going to go up the
No, that's
coast.
just
Like,
changing directions. That's not changing the type of the thing that it is.
I mean, if you're bringing it back to COVID, it's not like it's going to go from a coronavirus to a different type of virus. Like
Yeah, that's
a
true.
small portion of the virus might change, but the whole virus is still a coronavirus.
That's true.
So
That's a good point.
it's not like going from hurricane to sandstorm. It's going to go from like a tropical depression to a category 5.
Okay. Yeah, I get your point. That's a good point. Um, hmm. What other environmental things could that would be like an analogy for that would change?
Well, I mean, again, like I said before, it kind of comes back to the scope that you're framing it in, because the same terminology that you described could be used again. I'll just mention quickly, like for like a social movement is something that came to mind too. Right, where it's like something that's living and something that's evolving and something that's progressing and changing, right? And that's like it wasn't there before, but something sparked it,
Yeah.
and obviously there's a ton of examples. BLM would be a good one for the current era right now.
Sure.
But it's like, I would say that that's something that has life to it. That's something that evolves and changes and adapts and, moves through the world,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not living.
Hmm.
But you could still describe it the same way that you described, COVID in that original sense.
But it could die though. That social movement could die, and yet could
It
it
could.
ever be living?
Yeah, it could die. It could peter out and die. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it is alive, and that's what's so important is like the way that you frame it, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it didn't exist. So that's like, I guess that's a careful. Maybe that's the delineation we got to be careful of. Like, does it exist versus is it alive?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want to go through the Wikipedia definitions, or you just want to go off of what we believe?
I mean,
Established
the
right now.
Wikipedia, they're open to interpretation, but
Yeah.
Definitions of what?
Let's just go through it real quick. So in biology, the definition of biology, so that we were just on the same page here. Homeostasis, regulation of an internal environment to maintain a constant state. 2, organization, structurally composed, one or more cells. Oh yeah, by the way, since there is no unequivocal definition of life, most current definitions in biology are descriptive.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what you were talking about. We're kind of just working on it. Metabolism, transformation of energy by converting chemicals. So that definitely metabolism, converting of chemicals and energy into cellular components, and decomposing organic matter. Oh man,
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
that's bad for you.
yeah, because they don't have like liposomes, and they don't have like ways.
Well, if
I mean,
anything.
but no, yeah, they do. They have anti like defense mechanisms and stuff like that. That's turning, I mean, DNA and nucleotides and into proteins and stuff like that. I mean, it's not like a liposome or something like where you're literally just taking all the trash and decomposing it though. I don't know. I mean, so metabolism, if you're gonna be that, but if you're gonna do that, it's like metabolism, like, is bacteria alive then because they don't have mitochondria? It's like, you know
But
what I mean? You're being kind of,
they're still able to, like, they can still metabolize like a substrate, right? They
yeah,
can eat. They
yeah,
can
exactly,
eat.
yeah, and
That's
decompose,
I
yeah,
mean that's like the most basic definition of metabolism. Can you eat
and
something?
they're way more organized. Bacteria are, they
Right.
obviously
Right.
because they have like a structure. But I mean, coronavirus, man, if you look at it, I mean, it's crazy. You know the how organized it looks. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Well, so the biggest virus is called a Mimi virus, and that one, if you haven't looked at that one, that's a good one to look into because that one's like, I think that's the virus that is most living. If we were to ascribe a living title to virus, Mimi,
What
M-I-M-I. That one has like it's almost the size of a bacteria, and it has the most like complex and largest viral genome,
Oh,
and
cool.
it has genes in it that are typically associated with living organisms that aren't found in other viruses.
I
So
wonder what.
this is a good example of a virus that like really would make this debate difficult.
Huh. I wonder if this is. Well, I wonder what that Nature article is talking about because I did. There was like a recent discovery or a different. Yeah, I want to read
Yeah.
that with you. Anyway, um,
Mhm.
large and complex. I mean, yeah. I mean, they're huge genomes, man. It's like it's crazy. How big is this genome? Coronavirus. The coronavirus is 26,000 or 32,000 bases, which is huge. Um. Is this? Oh man, I wonder if the meme. I mean, the hypothesis that the um, the nucleus is actually a endosymbiotic large
A virus.
virus. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
actually saw a science paper, a science mag paper that they expressed some viral proteins from the remnants of like the nuclear genome or something. It's like to show like that
Yeah, there's like,
it's crazy.
isn't that like the thing with anything, like any complex organism just has tons of viral DNA in
Hmm.
it, just because
Yeah.
like you can't evolve throughout the history of the Earth without just carrying loads of
What?
viral
A
DNA with you.
million base pairs in length? Are you kidding me? This thing is
It's
huge.
it's massive, dude. It's
Oh
massive.
my
It's like the size.
gosh.
It's like the size of a bacteria, but it's a virus. It's huge.
Wow. There's 100 nanometer scale.
Hmm.
Wow, that is huge.
So yeah, so this is the, you know,
Oh my god, it has a linear double-stranded molecule of DNA. I mean, as a genome.
like
It's like, man, that is so close.
but it still doesn't check all the boxes. It still doesn't have metabolism. It still can't self-replicate. You know,
But
but it has.
okay. So let's say
Well,
no. It evolved not to have that. It doesn't need that.
sure,
It
sure.
doesn't need
It's
that.
a loss of function. It's a loss of function.
No,
So
that's fine. That happens in evolution all the time. There are
yeah,
geckos that went into caves and they lost their eyes because they don't need their eyes anymore because they live in caves. It doesn't mean that they de-evolved. They became more evolved.
yeah. No, no. It's yeah. It's a lot called loss of function, and
Exactly.
something I've never thought of before. But I don't want to get too off track because I know we only talked about your first point, and we want to get
Oh
back
yeah.
to your other points,
Oh,
right?
I can
But
slay you on the rest. Don't worry.
here's a great question for you, right?
Okay.
What if something living evolved, lost function, and became a virus?
Dude, that's a great question, man. I mean,
Would
that's
it still be considered like I don't
it
know what it
has
would
to
be,
be.
but let's say it was something like a type of bacteria, right? Essentially said, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that, and it de-evolved itself to only having things that we associate with viral components,
Oh
and
man.
it is now a virus,
Yeah, dude,
right?
a genome minimizing event like the chloroplast or something like that, or it's just like
Yeah,
doesn't
that's it happens. It happens. Yeah, it happens all the time in nature, especially microbiology, and that's
hmm
like I've never thought about that once before. That's a really great question right there.
I wonder
I want someone to figure that out.
how would you do that? How would you figure that out? You just look at like how would you
you,
see if that's happened before? Like
I
you do
mean, you would.
sequencing, wouldn't you? Like
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like whenever we look at stuff like that, you're doing it through phylogenetic sequencing or mapping, and you're looking at there's still retention of like common ancestral genes that allow you to place it on the tree,
yeah.
and then you look at like phenotypes, and you say, okay, well, it lost this function and that function and that function, right?
hmm
So maybe it might still have the genetic markers,
Yeah.
but it doesn't express the phenotype for whatever reason. So maybe I don't know. I don't think, obviously this hasn't happened. This is a very philosophical and theoretical question, but like that's a great question for this debate. Is if you were once living and then you know for reasons of efficiency, you essentially evolved yourself to become a non-living virus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
Would you still be living then,
I
right?
mean
Because here's an example for my background, right? So
mhm,
I study photosynthetic organisms,
mhm,
microalgae, right? There's a lot of microalgae that do photosynthesis, right? That's their
mhm,
main form of making energy. But there's also microalgae who have de-evolved the ability to make chlorophyll and to do photosynthesis, and they are
mhm.
colorless, right? They
Wow.
are clear, they're colorless, they
Yeah.
can't do photosynthesis, but they are microalgae, right? So they've lost that really defining ability that makes them what they are, right? So are they algae still? Are they still microalgae? Are
Yeah.
they, they don't do the one thing that is like the most defining aspect of them, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of other examples like that out there. But apply that same logic to viruses or something else. Like if you de-evolved, if you simplified your genome and your cell to the point of being a virus, would you still be considered a living organism?
Mhm.
And that comes to a different question that I had too, which is where did viruses come from?
From RNA life.
Yeah, but did a living cell come first or did a virus come first?
I mean, that was actually my second point, so we can go to my second point now. So like this is in that my second point, my broader umbrella term kind of being like viruses are a product of evolution.
Hmm.
But so and I was thinking like, okay, so does that mean like a protein is alive? And it's like, well, because I was thinking like directed evolution, you can, but there's directed evolution as a way to kind of like make a certain part of a genome kind of evolve specifically to do a certain gain of function or a way of interacting or happening or existing that's never happened or existed before. Um,
Right.
so like you can do that with RNA. You can do RNA sequences. You could do that with a protein. So like, does that protein exist as as a living being? I don't think so.
Hmm.
Um, because it doesn't have a way of replicating and storing genetic information. Hence the
Right.
evolution. And I think that's the key aspect. And then as we were just talking about that, like if the RNA life hypothesis is real, which is the idea that like before DNA, there was even RNA, and RNA can kind of
Right.
like
Right.
act as enzymes, and they can act like kind
Hmm.
of enzymatically to replicate themselves. So RNA might have been the basis of life instead of DNA. Uh, when did life begin then?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this same question, right? And to me, it always came back to the primordial pool, right?
Yeah.
And that's just, going way back pre-life into early Earth, where you've just got a lot of organic matter that's created through, happenstance, lightning strikes, whatever it might be. They've done those experiments where they're able to create the building blocks of life inside of a flask by
Yeah.
just
Nucleic
introducing
acids, right?
nucleic
Yeah.
acids. Yeah, just by introducing energy into a system, it's like they just naturally assemble.
Yeah.
So, is that life? Are the building blocks of life considered life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no, they're not, right?
Why?
Because I mean, again, it goes back to our definition of life, right? It goes back
Mm-hmm.
to our scope of like biology. Right? Is it matter? Yes. Does it exist? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it living? No. Right? Like we've seen those building blocks in like on other planets. We've seen them in other solar systems, right? You can see methane in other places. It's like it doesn't mean that there's life that created it. It just means that there's matter and energy that have come together and
Yeah.
assembled, right?
Yeah.
And it's just something that's like it happens, but it doesn't mean that it's living.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it has to be because it's just no way of just storing that genetic information. Once it's gone, that methane molecule has no way of transporting, has no culture, has no way of
Right. Well,
giving it away.
that's the thing. Like that's what makes life, right?
Yeah,
Is that we can pass on information genetically. We
exactly.
can,
And the mutations and
yeah,
stuff. Yeah, I totally agree.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, so viruses are a product of evolution. They definitely cause evolution. I mean, for not being lifelike, they
Hmm.
sure do make a big impact in the world. Through in biology. I mean, uh, I was thinking like, man, it must make. I was thinking, I wonder if it makes the biggest impact that's not in living. But then I'm like, well, the environment, man. I mean, environment shapes evolution so much. I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, like direct genetic change. I mean, you'd have to argue that it would be viruses that made that the biggest change. And the environment is a good selector, like
Hmm.
a driver of evolution and a driver of speciation. But to say that, I don't. It'd be kind of
So
anyway.
are you saying the virus itself is causing mutations in other organisms?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Okay.
And I mean, with endogenic retroviruses, with all the environmental, um, it's it's just kind of like a weird thing that's with all the environmental DNA and stuff out there, and then you have
Hmm.
viruses and stuff, and it's just like it's a very messy world to be like a
It's very
microbe.
messy.
Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of genetic
Sure.
information out there, and it's like for
Hmm.
for an organism to kind of like have to sort through that genetic code that's being bombarded at them constantly, and then um, through the environment, it's pretty crazy. Maybe they
Hmm.
should develop like some type of um, I don't know. a some type of defense mechanism to take out specific sequences or something.
If only they could just like identify it and just like cut it out as
I
soon as they
know.
see it. Just like,
Jeez,
yeah,
so
man,
crazy.
that'd be a crisp resolution to anything.
That would be a huge. What a revelation! I still can't believe like CRISPR was like evolved. So it reminds me like CRISPR being discovered so late reminds me of like the giant panda. The giant panda is the largest mammal to ever be discovered. It's like
Is that
it's
right?
yeah, dude.
It was like the
So
last one. It was like
mhm,
the last one because it
exactly.
just like it like
Guess
lives in a bamboo cave,
exactly,
just like no one
exactly,
ever goes there. Yeah.
exactly. Guess when it was discovered, dude. This will blow your mind.
1960s.
Yeah, early 1900s, dude. I'm just like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's pretty.
Oh my gosh, so
Hmm,
crazy. I mean,
that's crazy. That's really recent.
yeah, exactly. 100 years ago. Like, give me a break.
Hmm.
Um, okay. So, I mean, you're kind of agreeing with me with the viruses are a product of evolution thing. You're not really. You're kind
Whoa, I don't, no, I don't think we've gotten there yet. I think, I agree with you that viruses cause, that they influence a genetic population,
Mm-hmm.
for better or worse. So do a lot of other abiotic things,
Yeah, like the environment, like we're talking about.
like the environment. So are they, I mean, I'll let you ask the next question if they're not.
Well, I mean, you haven't given me anything to refute this. I mean, they
What?
evolve. They evolve.
Viruses evolve,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah.
Yeah. Everything evolves.
So that's a big. Okay, so that's a big differentiation between viruses and every other abiotic thing. Then we can agree that it shares. It's a thing that viruses
Because
share with other living organisms.
right. I mean, when we say they evolve, we're talking specifically about their genetic makeup, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Their genetic makeup changes, absolutely,
And they don't
right?
they don't do it with. It's not like a directed evolution experiment for like a protein or something like that. They evolve on their own, independently of humans.
So, yeah, anything with DNA is going to evolve on its own, independently
Well,
of anything.
RNA too, but RNA
Yeah,
viruses, but
DNA.
nucleic
Yeah,
acids.
give any piece of DNA enough time, it's going to change, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
um,
So it shares. So you're saying that this shares this property with life of viruses.
well, I mean, like life is evolution. There's no evolution
So there you
without
go. You
life.
just agreed with me. You agreed with
There's no
me.
life.
You just
No.
agreed with
There's
me. You just.
hold on,
That's it. We can end the video
We're
here. You
done.
said life
We're
is
done. And
evolution.
all right,
Viruses evolve. You just agreed with me.
thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. That's it.
Just
We'll see you. We'll see you next week. I mean, yeah, it is like evolution is life, right? And maybe I might be contradicting myself by saying that, but it's true.
That's what
There's
my whole
nothing
point is.
there's nothing in life that is constant forever and stable forever. It's always changing. It's always moving, and that's what makes it life. That's what makes it. That's the difference between that and something abiotic that just sits there and doesn't change, right? Or
Exactly.
doesn't change for a reason, right? And life is changing for a reason, right? It's not there. Well, I should say this: changes happen to it randomly, but the ones that continue to move forward happen for a reason, right? And that's what evolution is.
Yeah. I mean,
Still doesn't mean viruses are living.
they evolve. Evolution
But
is
there's
life, and
more. That is but one requirement for something to be living,
I don't know, man. I
right?
think it's the biggest one. I really do. I mean, if we look back at
It's
these other things, it's like homeostasis. It's like, dude, you could evolve to. These are all like the biggest thing with evolution. I feel like is that like everything is subject to mutations. So you can
mhm.
select for different parameters for a host of different reasons. So like reproduction, man. I mean, like that's such a weird. You can evolve to reproduce a ton of different ways. And obviously reproducing it by themselves, I think that's a big thing. That's what kind of like identifies the viruses from the proteins. Um,
Right.
but I think that's a product that is evolution too. It has to, in order to live and be subject to evolution, it has to reproduce. So, you know what I mean? It's like it's all has to do with
Well,
evolution.
that's the thing about that's the thing about evolution and the reproduction requirement, right? If you evolved a great trait and you can't pass it on, then it doesn't matter,
It's not that
right?
great.
It's gonna
It's worth
it's
losing.
gonna it's gonna well no, it's gonna go extinct. Let's say like a virus, right?
Hmm.
If a virus evolved a trait that is the best trait a virus could ever evolve, whatever that might be, and it can't pass it on, then that's going to go extinct and
Yeah.
doesn't matter,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? So that's the thing. Like you have to be able to continue the evolutionary trend, right?
Hmm.
And if you have a substantial requirement to continue it. Meaning, if you need someone else to do all the work for you, and you need something else that's alive to exist for you to do it, then you yourself are unlikely to be alive.
Wrong. This is my last point, but it's my strongest point, and this is no, you're wrong. Let's
hear it.
Parasitoids, dude. Come on, you know this. Parasitoids exist, and they require other organisms in order to evolve. This is something that they evolved to do because it's very efficient. It's very efficient not to.
So, I knew you were going to bring up parasites, right? Because that's a good obvious one. I like that one, right? So my two rebuttals to the parasites were that what you just said was, one, they evolved to do it, right? They didn't always do this, right? And this is an example of what we were talking about before about evolving different traits, right? They didn't always require multiple hosts to complete their life cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, the parasite itself is still alive. Like, so if we're talking about like a typical parasite, let's say that it has multiple hosts that it needs to complete its life cycle, right? It lays its eggs in one. It has its larvae. They grow up and they need to infest another one that needs to, be eaten or something. There's a lot of different examples out there, but in each of those points of the life cycle, it's still alive and it's still maintaining itself.
What?
Right?
How can no, it's not alive by your own definition. That at each stage, it has to go to the next thing in order to it can't reproduce by itself.
Only to reproduce sexually, right? They're still reproducing asexually during those stages because they might be growing in size, right? During that stage, so they're making more of their own cells in that stage. They are maintaining themselves. They're metabolizing themselves. They could. We don't have an exact example that we're talking about, but certain parasites could stay in one of those phases for a prolonged period of time. And it's not so much that, like, if it doesn't get to the next stage, it dies. It's just a matter of it can't sexually reproduce until it gets to that next stage. So it's stuck. It's stuck in its current host. Then it can't
evolve. So then it's not living.
No, it could theoretically still evolve if you're stuck there. Its DNA could still change, and it could still, and it might pick up a trait that makes it more efficient at the next stage.
Yeah, you're right.
And so it could evolve.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right.
But it's so true because that's what viruses are. They're parasites, right? A virus is it requires a host, but true parasites themselves have so much more going for them that it's not just that they require a host to live at all. It's they require a host to complete their like sexual life cycle.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Wow. Parasitism on Wikipedia here is a symbiotic relationship between species where one organism, the parasite, lives on or inside another organism, the host, causing it some harm, and is adapted structurally to this way of life. I wanted to see if they wanted to say
I mean, I bet by some definitions and with some parasites that they could be argued that they're not living anymore. And maybe going back to my first hypothetical question, maybe that's something that's more possible in terms of like evolving to the point where you're not living, right?
But I think still like if your host organism goes extinct, you go extinct.
Yep.
So it's required. Sure. So you can't. And you're gonna go extinct because there's no way.
But that's because your food is gone, right? That's like
no, it's how they it's how they carry on. Like I mean, you can't just asexually reproduce for millennia. I mean, you're gonna go extinct.
I don't have the expertise to answer that in terms of parasites, because I want. That's a good question. Like, is there a certain phase in a parasite where you could go on, through mitosis and continuously produce the same whatever forever, but it's, you require another host to make a sexual reproduction.
Yeah, I wonder if you could like switch hosts in that. If you could switch hosts in that scenario. And I guess you'd have to actually be in that mode. It matters like what type of homeostasis that they're kind of like in. Are they like generating massive amounts of mutations during that period of time? Because you'd think that
Yeah.
you would actually, there's reasons that you would see it make massive amounts of changes and not. One, massive amounts of changes because you could actually switch hosts if you needed to. And then two, it's like, well, let's not make massive amounts of changes. Let's do a bunch of proofreading now, actually, because we need to save all of this information inside the genome because we got to make sure we're finding the right animal and stuff like that. Because that's the crazy thing about parasites is that they have like, there's like parasitoid the insects that do like brain surgery on cockroaches. It's fascinating. The first time that they see these things, it's either like they either do brain surgery perfectly and insert their little egg or whatever into the brain of the cockroach to live, or they die. It's just like a
Right.
couple chances and that's it. So it's crazy because it's just not a learned trait. A lot of parasites, there's no learning. It's just you have all that genetic information. It's either there or they go extinct. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the whole field of parasites it's so complex and it's so case by case. It's hard to generalize any specific statement besides the fact that those things that are defined as parasites require a host to complete their life cycle. You know, but back to our fundamental question of whether or not that makes them living or not. I like parasites. From what I remember, I believe every parasite is multicellular, right? I don't think there's any single-celled parasites. Someone can fact check me on that. But
That's a really interesting.
I think that most, if not all, parasites are multicellular, and that alone right there tells you that they're living because they're making multiple cells. They're making copies of themselves. They have
Protozoa.
the ability. They have the ability to grow, and
Protozoa is an informal term for a group of single-celled eukaryotes, either free-living or parasitic. They're single-celled.
there are single-celled parasites. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Dude, microbiology is crazy, man.
It's so hard to make. You can never make like one generalizing statement in microbiology.
Yeah,
It's
in
just like
biology in general, man, it's crazy. There's always some
it's
group.
too
There's always
complex.
something like going on. It's so cool. It
But
is so cool.
even protozoa, it's like you could cut a cell in half, and the two cells will just go on living. So it's not like, I don't know. It's not like they can't reproduce themselves very effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, okay, so that was my biological point, but I think you're making some good points, but I still think that you still require it, and I don't know, man. I really feel like viruses, they can switch hosts in that scenario, like the parasites that we're talking about, and that with what's going on, they can switch hosts to obviously what we're seeing right now, and they can reproduce asexually inside the host before they switch. And so you have reservoirs, you have tons of different ways. The fact that they don't, I feel like the fact that they don't have to have the organisms, like the structure and the hierarchy of cells and all that kind of stuff that you see in eukaryotes is an advantage. It's like an evolutionary advantage.
well, I think that's why viruses spread so quickly, right? It's they have very little baggage.
Exactly.
They're extremely efficient at what they do, right? It's like, evolving to be a complex organism is really cool for a lot of reasons. But in terms of just basic thermodynamics and wanting to spread and populate, you want as little complexity as possible. And a virus nailed it. They're the most efficient thing in the world in terms of just making more of themselves and spreading quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. My next point. Academia already agrees with me. Looking at Wikipedia, the People's Journal, Frank. It's the People's Journal. This isn't an academic journal.
Did you edit this? Did you edit this right before this recording?
No, it did not. It's the People's Journal of Record. Okay, it's not. This isn't Science, Nature, or Cell. This is look at this. Virology. Part of a series on biology.
Okay.
Checkmate.
Checkmate. It's on Wikipedia. Checkmate.
That's it.
If it's on Wikipedia, it's alive.
But this gets to my greater point, man. Like, academia already agrees with me that, like, one, it's in microbiology. You know, you learn about it in microbiology, man. Like in your microbiology class.
Sure.
And let me play devil's advocate for you. What other fields? What part of science would you learn about this in if it wasn't microbiology? The chemistry, you're gonna learn about viruses in chemistry, biochem, physics. I mean, come on, that doesn't make any sense. What? Yeah,
you learn about social studies. Come on, you'll learn about it then.
I mean, it's like it's obviously biology. I mean, it's like
it is. Well, it is because it's made of genetic material. But that doesn't mean genetic material is living. Okay, come on, you're a microbiologist, you're in the lab, you just purified some DNA, you've got it in a test tube, you've got your little pellet, you precipitated it out. Is that living?
No, like we were saying, like that. I mean,
but you're not going to learn about it in another class, right? But is it living?
I guess you can learn about nucleic acids and stuff like in biochem, but it's different. I mean, the viruses are inherently different because they can, you know, RNA can fold to create enzymatic functions, and it could be. I mean, that's the origin of life, unless. I mean, the real question is prions. Are prions living?
Are prions living? Sure. Let's take it 1 degree further.
Yeah, exactly.
Living, right. Yeah, it's.
You know, this is legit. Like, I actually was in seminar, and they had a guy from NASA, and they were talking about this, how NASA is legitimately thinking about. Yeah, they're looking at like prions and like smaller forms of biology even than like
they're just worried about like something that's self-replicating in space, right? Like anything that could like harm people, that's a threat to astronauts or a threat to someone who's stuck inside of a capsule for months.
Yeah, because it's a great question. Like, what do we study for life on other planets? You know, I mean, this is a great goal. Like, if we found an RNA virus on Mars, what would we say? Oh, actually, this isn't living. Like, I mean,
well, that was another question that I was thinking about too, right? Because we're close to having humans on Mars. We're close to figuring out, are these types of things on Mars, right? And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, okay, what's going to be the threshold? Because I feel like we're going to march through the spectrum, right? We're going to say like, okay, hey, there's matter, right? Hey, there's assembled matter. Hey, there's self-replicating matter. Hey, there's intelligent matter, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so when are we going to draw the line? And when is NASA going to drop that headline that like, there's life on Mars? Are they going to do it when they find a strand of DNA? Mm-hmm. Are they going to do it when they find a virus? Are they going to do it when they find a bacterial cell? What's going to be their delimitation and their final conclusive yes, there's going to be life out there, and that'll be really interesting because what if, not to say that the other things don't exist, but what if they find a virus first? Is NASA going to find, if NASA found it, this is a great question for this debate. If NASA found a virus that's never been seen before, if they found a virus on Mars tomorrow, would they say there's life on Mars?
I mean, it's
My end, my,
and independently. I mean, it's an organism. It's not an organism, but I guess it's like a man,
so this brought me down like two different paths.
individual body. Whatever you should call it.
So my first instinct would say that they would say yes,
Mm-hmm.
but they would have a caveat that says, yes, there's life on Mars. Here's proof there's a virus, right? Just like say,
But how
because
would you
they'd say,
know? But you wouldn't know it was a parasite. You wouldn't know there
well,
was another
okay,
living thing. So you would
right.
just would the headline be like, "Oh, we can actually there is life because we know that there's a virus, so we know that a virus is real." So then it's
Yeah. So the other thing I was thinking about was kind of back to my chicken and the egg question, right?
yeah.
Which is what came first, viruses or living organisms? And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, okay, a virus can't replicate without a living organism, but that doesn't mean that viruses weren't around and alive before living organisms. It just means that they weren't replicating, right? So I'm kind of curious, and I don't have the background knowledge
Wow, that's a
to
great question.
confirm this, but kind of back to the primordial pool question, right? If you just take a bunch of organic stuff and put it together, would you ever get something that looked like a virus and then just died because it didn't have a host,
Yeah,
right?
how long could they like stay at that spot or stay like
Well,
at that thing looking for
would
a
it even
host?
assemble? Would it even
Yeah.
assemble? Like, is there such thing as like spontaneous generation when it comes to viruses?
Mm-hmm.
Without any living hosts, without any cells that could have, machinery and self-replication abilities, like, could you just take a bunch of stuff and get a virus to spontaneously generate? And then that virus wouldn't have a host, so it would then just degrade and die, right? And was that happening all the time before life evolved? And then as soon as life evolved, that virus was like, hey, cool, finally I'm useful. I can self-replicate, I can infect, and then they just never left, right? Or did a cell evolve first and then this is why I don't think this is the way it happened. I don't think a cell evolved first and then viruses evolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that viruses came first. I think that viruses can somehow spontaneous generate because it just makes sense. Like they're like these simple little things, but I guess yeah, maybe the protein. They have to have a protein, right? So like,
No,
where's the
because
protein?
the RNA can fold, man. The RNA can
The
fold.
RNA can become the capsid portion. I don't
Sure.
know. I don't know. I don't know enough about like ancient viruses and like what
Yeah.
like an old simple like the most simple form of a virus could be, right? I don't know enough about that, but this is my theoretical question out here, right? It's kind of a chicken and the egg, and in my mind, it would make sense that a virus could spontaneously generate, and then there's no host to infect, so it just dies off, and it does that until a host emerges. And once a host emerges, it can finally infect it, and then it can evolve, right? Then it can begin evolving, then it can begin changing, and diversifying and progress to the plethora of viruses that we have today. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, I mean, so this is apparently like a Nobel went to this person looking at the structure of protein making factories. This is basically the whole thing. Like you can't make DNA, you have to have, proteins, but you have to have RNA to make the DNA or yeah, exactly what you're talking about. It's just like an interesting question.
It's an interesting question, and I bet it's one of those questions that just goes unanswered forever because we could never, like the molecular evidence, that you would have for that is just going to be impossible to find. But kind of relating to my question for like life on Mars, right? If we went to Mars and we found evidence of a virus, would that conclusively mean there is or isn't life? And with what I just said, and maybe I'm changing my answer from before now, with what I just said, I think that would mean that it doesn't conclusively mean that there's life because, in my opinion, certain types of viruses could probably spontaneously generate.
Mm-hmm. Well, it
And
looks
again,
like
I think the viruses that we're looking at today are more complex than what I'm imagining, right? Because I think it's more in line with like what you said with an RNA virus.
Hmm. What is in the world? This is such an interesting RNA catalyzed RNA polymerization, accurate in general RNA templated primer extension. It's kind of like what I was talking about for could exist. This process had yielded an RNA enzyme called R18 that could stick 14 nucleotides onto an existing RNA and use another RNA as a template. Any self-replicating RNA, however, needs to build RNAs that are at least as long as itself. It's 189 nucleotides long.
What are you looking at?
But this is New Scientist. They're talking about like the origin of life on the RNA thing. So big advance came earlier this year when Philip Hollinger of the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge and colleagues unveiled an RNA enzyme called TC19Z. It reliably copies RNA sequences up to 95 letters long, almost as long as itself. To do this,
but not its full self.
Yeah, 19Z clamps onto the end of RNA, attaches the correct nucleotide, then moves forward a step and adds another. What, one nucleotide? Wow. That's cool. Okay, so I'm really interested now. Those are all my points. It seems okay. So we went through my points, my 5 points. So I really am interested in our ideas on this. So let's do the 10 reasons to exclude viruses from the tree of life. So this is Nature Reviews Microbiology, and they had like a so we can read the abstract and then go through. So 10 reasons to exclude. So this is the dominant position. This is what people already agree is correct. So abstract. When viruses were discovered, they were accepted as missing links between the inner world and living organisms. However, this idea was soon abandoned as information about their molecular parasitic nature accumulated. Recently, the notion that viruses are living organisms that have had a role in the evolution of some essential features of cells has experienced a renaissance, owing to the discovery of unusually large and complex viruses that possess typical cellular genes. Here, we contend that there is strong evidence against the notion that viruses are alive and represent ancient lineages of the tree of life. So this is an interesting point. So this is a comparison of the thing. So comparison of the cellular.
These are the 10 points.
Yeah. These are just the table 1 comparison of the cellular and viral traits. So they're saying self-maintenance. So this is kind of like what we were talking about with the Wikipedia article.
Right.
Self-maintenance viruses can't do that. Self-replication viruses can't do that. But I thought we were just talking about that. Oh, I guess they I mean, you can't. You have the RNA that's going in, but you have to make more RNA in order for it to fold, in order to make more RNA.
You can't do that yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Evolution, viruses do it by cells, they argue. Cells do it themselves.
Right, because there's no RNA replication machinery inside the virus, so you can't replicate the mutation.
Exactly. Common ancestry. Viruses have no common ancestry?
To what?
What? That's so weird. I don't understand what they're talking about.
I don't understand that point either.
I mean, it's just we don't have any of the. I mean, it's so far. What is it? Seriously, 3-4 billion years ago, this is all happening. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't know what they mean by that point. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Structural historical continuity. So I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess we don't have phylogenetics for like the entire viral tree of life. And then they're saying the genes involved in carbon metabolism, energy metabolism, and protein synthesis all happens in cellular origin.
Right. So the only thing that's a yes on there is the first one, which is
information content.
information.
That's
It
pretty good.
has,
It's a good point. I mean, I gotta give him to him. That is a good point.
yeah. Mhm.
Viruses are not alive. Definition of life or living things. This isn't showing up. I can't click on it. Oh, I wanted to see. I couldn't. I'm gonna try to find this. I was looking for the paper that actually like said like or talked about this. What is like when do we decide about this tree of life or anything like that? I can't find that. Okay.
And it's all subjective, you know. Um,
Well,
it,
not necessarily. I mean, it's
no, come on. This is all man-made. It's all humans just trying to put things in boxes, right? We love to organize things. We love to categorize things. Um,
hmm.
what's in the tree of life, what isn't.
So you're saying that like taxonomy is fake, but phylogenetics is real?
Oh, well.
What do you say? So then there's no viral phylogenetic tree that we've constructed. So
I've seen viral phylogenetic trees, so that's why I don't understand that point. I mean, it's
yeah, I don't.
you can construct a phylogenetic tree out of anything that you have information of. It might not be a good one, but you
Yeah,
could do it. Like
yeah.
um, so I didn't really understand that point, but
Dang, dude, this is a dagger. Simpletons. They're calling them simple geometric shapes. Oh, ouch,
ouch, ouch,
ouch.
ouch. Yeah,
Limitations of
I remember.
morphology.
I remember in school, my professor saying that viruses were just complex dust.
Ouch, dude, that's not cool. Distant hosts do not imply antiquity. Viral lineages lack structural continuity. I mean, I guess there's just not the robust like vertebra or something that we have. But
I'll have to go back and read this because I don't necessarily understand a couple of those points that they're making there,
which
like
ones?
structural continuity. Like viruses aren't. I don't know what they mean by what they're saying that because
Uh,
I feel like a virus would be essentially identical, right, to the last virus that it came from.
so this is talking about what we were talking about. Viruses are polyphyletic.
Mm-hmm.
If a phylogenetic tree is a conceptual representation of evolutionary relationships among taxa. For more than a century, it has been recognized that a phylogenetic tree can only be inferred by studying characteristics that have been inherited from the last common ancestor of the taxa. That is,
Right.
proper phylogenetic analysis should be only be done on homology. This makes it
Yeah.
impossible to include viruses in the tree of life. Although a few
Mm.
genes are shared between some specific viral lineages and their host cells, viruses as a whole do not share homologous characteristics with cells. That's interesting. So they're
That
just
is
so
interesting.
different. They're just so different you can't even put them on like the same. But I mean, wouldn't you just put that like
Well, no, that's what they're saying by it being polyphyletic is that there's not a shared common ancestor amongst all viruses,
yeah.
right? Whereas, like to some degree, you could call all life polyphyletic if you wanted to, but no one does that. But um, but essentially, what polyphyletic means, right, is that you have a bunch of things that are related to each other, but they don't share a single common ancestor, but you still group them because of a certain characteristic, right?
This is what we're talking about here. This is contradicting what you just said. Members of the different viral families are composed of different nucleic acids and capsid constituents and have different gene contents. This strongly suggests that viruses have various evolutionary origins, that is, they are polyphyletic. By contrast,
Right.
overwhelming evidence shows that all cellular life has a single common origin.
Right. No, that's what I was saying. Maybe if I misspoke, I apologize. But I was saying that you could call, maybe I said polyphyletic instead of saying monophyletic. But all life has an origin, right? Has a single common origin of some sort of bacteria, right?
Interesting.
Whereas, well, does this support what I was saying earlier about spontaneous generation then?
Hmm.
Because if viruses are spontaneously generating, and I'm not saying like a new virus like COVID-19 did not spontaneously generate, that evolved from a
Yeah.
previous virus. I'm talking about literally
Primordial
just
soup.
like primordial soup, brand new virus because just through happenstance and enough time and enough collisions happened that oops, I made something that's technically a virus, right?
Hmm.
And now you have multiple points of origin. I think that supports what I'm saying. I think that means that viruses can evolve without life, but they cannot perpetuate without life.
Hmm. Interesting. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. So I don't know if I agree, or that just blows my mind that I'll have to read more about these papers, with the overwhelming evidence shows that the all cellular life has a single common origin. I guess I just saw it more of as like a kind of like an evolutionary thing, where it's just like there's a population that evolves, and you have like different types of things that are um, evolving life, so there's going to be lots of different like things that are there that could technically still interbreed with one another and all that kind of stuff. And like I mean, I could understand like a population, but like a
Right.
single common or like origin, like a single thing that evolved out of everything else, and then that's where all life came from. I mean, that's I'll have to read this. This is really interesting. I've never thought about that. Hmm. Um. There's there are no ancestral viral lineages. There's no single gene that is shared by all viruses. Dang.
That's
Wow.
surprising. That's
That is
surprising to
very
me.
surprising. With capsids, the capsid proteins and all that kind of stuff, like,
That's what I was thinking. I figured some of those things would definitely be conserved.
but shared by all viruses. I mean, they're. I mean, this is almost. I don't know, man.
Well,
Like that's a
that's how you can
minimizing
prove
event.
that. That's how you can. Well, see, that's a great question, right? Because yeah, like one of the very first things we were talking about, right? We were saying that if you wanted to de-evolve something, right? Typically, typically we group things by phenotype, right? By their
Yep.
physical appearance and their characteristics, and we can say, oh, this de-evolved this trait. It doesn't have a tail anymore or something, right? But
Yep.
the gene for it is still hidden in there, so you can still genetically map it and track it back and say, yeah, it's still part of this group, but it just
Yeah.
doesn't have it de-evolved that.
It's a
And you can't do
pseudogene.
that with the viruses, so you can't prove it either way, right? You can't
Yeah.
prove that it had it and then it lost it, and you can't prove that it just had it, that it just spontaneously happened.
How would you'd have to like genetically modify it to have that gene again or something, like instead of like a knockout event, like what we do with
And not,
molecular biology, you like knock in.
yeah,
It's like
you knock in, yeah, and that's how you get COVID, guys.
exactly. um okay. um Most viral capsids adopt a small number of simple geometric structures so that their protein tertiary structures are subject to strong constraints. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, that just shows that they're highly evolved, I feel like. The second alternative is horizontal gene transfer, which can move genes between extremely distant species. Distant hosts do not imply antiquity.
Well, wait,
Okay.
hold on.
Do you want to go back?
No, I just want to. You just said this shows that they're highly evolved, but the fact that they are polyphyletic and don't share any ancestral genes almost completely refutes the idea of evolution. And
Hmm.
this is a challenging question to answer, again, from what I just said, because you can't. It's like you can't disprove that. You can't prove that it didn't have the gene, right? It's
Hmm.
really hard to prove that proving the negative, right? But it's you know part of like that idea of evolution is carrying the past forward, right? Making it better and carrying it forward.
Yeah.
But if none of these viruses have evidence of that, none of them share a single gene, or there's not, sorry, a single gene is not shared amongst all viruses, rather, that's telling me that again, they're not following the traditional path of evolution, and that rather they are spontaneously occurring, and there's a lot of different ways to be a virus, right? And then once those, ancestral forms of viruses take hold, they then evolve
Hmm.
and mature. But it kind of goes back to my point that like I think a virus can just happen. A brand new virus can come out of nowhere at any point, right? And that means that it's not living because it's being spontaneously generated, and that's to me that tells me that's not what life is. Life doesn't just happen. Life comes from something, right?
But
Life
if,
is
if
being
they don't have
passed forward.
but they don't. I don't think that they're saying that there's. I think like them not having a single gene just means that, I mean, they are going through evolution and there's a population of them that exists. It's just that they mutate at such a high rate that they're able to use other proteins in order for to have that function because of the mutation rate being so high and the
Yeah,
recombination, all that kind of stuff. And that's what they're talking about here, because it's, the simple structures that exist are because of, you got you can mutate something and put it together simply. You can't, you don't have like these really strong, how should I say, like these complex structures like diatoms or
right.
something like that. Because
Well, I
you're able
think
to lose them, and that's
you can
you're
lose them,
losing them
and
through
you're
evolution, but you're losing them through evolution. That's the whole point.
and yeah, in a lot of regards, that's like it's almost like the ultimate form of life in that regard, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like you need the least amount to do what everyone else is trying to do, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But they
And
mutate
that's
so quickly.
yeah, and that's again, it's just I think that's why this debate is so difficult because you can't prove that they didn't ever have those genes, right? You need to find some missing link that shows the progression. You would need to find multiple missing links, to prove that progression.
Well,
And
here
that
we go,
hasn't happened yet.
dude. So this is really interesting. This is exactly what you were talking about on this point. Distant hosts do not imply antiquity. It may seem reasonable to think that one or several viral lineages appeared early after or even simultaneously to cell evolution, which is exactly what you were talking about. However, this cannot currently be proven. The fact that some viral lineages infect phylogenetically distant hosts is sometimes used as evidence for their ancient origin. This requires a model of coevolution between viruses and hosts, namely that viruses speciate after hosts speciate.
Mhm.
Accordingly, hosts and virus phylogenies must be congruent. That is, their topologies must have the same distributions of nodes as must be their respective ages. For example, since their origin by endosymbiosis, mitochondria have co-evolved with eukaryotic cells so that their bacterial endosymbiont that gave rise to the mitochondria is inferred to be as old as the ancestor of all present-day eukaryotes. Using this logic, viruses with similar architectures that infect prokaryotes and eukaryotes have been proposed to be at least old as the sen ancestor. However, it is extremely difficult to apply this type of reasoning to parasites, for host shift happens. For instance, we could deduce that the Cyndidians, a group of parasitic dinoflagellates, are as old as the whole eukaryotic domain because they can infect hosts that belong to distant eukaryotic phyla, including animals and various protists. This conclusion is wrong, however, as the origin of Cyndidians, a derived lineage of eukaryotes, cannot precede or be simultaneous to that of the ancestor of all eukaryotes. The capacity of Cyndidians to infect different hosts does not mean that they have co-evolved with them, just that they can shift between hosts. Interesting.
I'm not sure what to make of that.
Well, I think it's talking about your primordial ooze
So
hypothesis, saying kind of like they're not spontaneously evolving; they're evolving to change hosts.
yeah, I mean, I would think it's kind of one and the same in that regard.
Well, one's a product of like long-term evolution, and which is what I would argue, versus them like being able to, evolve quickly out of whatever nucleic acids or nucleotides or whatever is available.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it too is like it kind of depends at like what point in time are you asking that question, and are you analyzing the virus? Are you talking about like whenever it originally originated, or is it once it has an acceptable host and it's actively infecting?
Dang, dude, this is pretty strong evidence. I'm not gonna lie. Cellular origins of metabolic genes. I mean, we have all that. Oh, look at this. Among the well-known cases of metabolism genes in viruses, the most remarkable is the presence of PSBA and PSBD genes that encode components of the photosystem 2 in cyanobacterial phages, which are transcriptionally active during infection. What? And
Weird.
in this,
Really?
yeah, dude, this is
I never heard
crazy.
of that.
This is
Let's
so
go.
this is so cool. And this in similar cases, such as genes that are involved in central metabolism, including carbonic anhydrases, superoxide dismutases, blah, blah, blah. Phylogenetic analyses demonstrate that these genes can be acquired from the host by horizontal gene transfer. Wow. Moreover, a simple interference of gene content in the
Wait,
ancestors.
does that open the door to the possibility that viruses gave cyanobacteria the ability to
Yes.
photosynthesize?
Yeah, because it makes the host do like better, like because it's doing
Is that
photosynthesis.
is that is
What?
that wait, is that
That's
really, could that
crazy.
be? Is that where photosynthesis came from then?
From viruses? Oh
From a virus?
man,
That's pretty cool.
dude!
Like
Wow!
if that was the case, that's the shit, because like
Damn!
there's no
Wow!
life without, well, there's not no life, but there's no actual life without photosynthesis, right? Like we need that to make everything. And if that came from a virus,
Wow, dude, that's crazy.
if a virus with, something like PSBA, which gives you chlorophyll, infects a bacterial cell, transfer those genes in there, and now that bacteria can photosynthesize.
So here we go. Moreover, a simple interference of gene content in the ancestors of the different viral families for which complete genome sequences are available shows that they did not contain any of those genes. A lack of metabolic genes in those viral ancestors strongly argues against an ancient origin predating cells, invalidating recent claims that propose this scenario. I don't understand the
I mean,
moreover a simple interference of the gene content in the ancestors of the different viral families for which the complete genome sequences are available shows that they did not contain any of this. So they didn't have them at the very start, but then they evolved to have PSBA and PSBD because that helps them through HGT to give it to their hosts. Is that what they're saying?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and read that myself. I think I think it's the kind of the overall point that they're making, though, is that um, living cells and viruses are extremely intertwined. You know, it's not so much that you can't have one without the other, but it's almost inevitable to be a living organism and not have a virus, right? And when you have a virus, it's going to cause so much change for you. It's going to provide selective pressure. It's going to introduce, like we were just saying, new genes through horizontal gene transfer. It's going to kill like nothing else, right? Just the amount of selective pressure that they put on living organisms and the amount of change that they cause is probably under-recognized, in most things. And it's really interesting to see how in like the current environment with COVID, all of a sudden everyone's a virologist and an expert on viruses, knows everything about it, right? Right, just like, yeah. I think it's fun to have this type of podcast right now about that, but it's been going on forever and will go on forever. I don't think there is life without viruses.
Yeah. Definitely a big driver of evolution, man. I mean, that's that biotic speciation event, cellular origin of the translation genes. They're talking about the Mimi virus here.
The Mimi virus is the big one, the most living of viruses.
They say some viruses, including the Mimi virus, possess several genes that are involved in protein synthesis. However, these genes have been acquired from the host by horizontal gene transfer. Boom! Just taking them out. Yeah. Implying that viruses never had the capacity to synthesize their own proteins. This has important phylogenetic implications, as the strongest claims to consider viruses as living beings at the place in the tree of life come from the presence of translated related genes in certain viruses, which would eventually open the possibility of including them in the universal phylogenetic trees based on these genes. However, of those genes are cellular origin, they're corresponding trees and not reflect organism. Go ahead.
I want to highlight that statement there because that's important, right? Because we were talking about this before about how no viruses shared a single gene. And here's an example of a gene that is shared amongst pretty much all living organisms appearing in a virus. And that would theoretically put this virus on the tree of life because you could say, look, it has the gene, therefore it came from the same ancestral host that everything else did because it has this really, really important gene, making protein. But it didn't get it through evolution. It stole it. It got it through horizontal gene transfer, right?
Sure. Let's see. Viruses are gene robbers. What is that?
Look at that. Did I write this paper?
Ouch. Why are they going to be so mean? Viruses evolve and recombine at much higher rates than cells. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Moreover, massive sequencing of viral genomes and metagenomes has revealed that viruses possess many genes that have no clear homologs in cells. Consequently, it's been speculated that viruses play a crucial part in evolution of new protein functions with the biotic speciation that we were talking about, either by modification of pre-existing genes or the creation of new genes. Let's see if there's anything else. Most HGT occurs from cells to viruses. That's kind of interesting. That's where their anti-CRISPR systems come from, obviously. Simplicity does not mean antiquity. The concluding remarks. I just wanted to, let's see. It is hard to accept that the definition of an organism necessarily requires portions of another organism. This is the parasite argument that they're making.
What do they say about it?
Let's see. It's kind of hard to use to talk about it without taking out the entire thing. This ending conclusion paragraph is probably worth reading here. If viruses are not alive and cannot be included in the tree of life, this does not imply that they have not had or continue to have a significant role in the evolution of life on Earth, which is exactly what you're talking about. Um, On the contrary, being abundant, for example, marine waters contain at least one order of magnitude more viruses than prokaryotic cells, and comprising a major selective pressure that exerts a strong control on the populations of many cellular organisms. They're an important source and means of maintaining biodiversity, which is what we were talking about, the biotic selection, pressure, and speciation. Like other mobile genetic elements, such as transposons and oh my god, dude, they're gonna put viruses and transposons in the same. Ouch!
In the same category.
Come on, man. No way. Like other mobile genetics.
Are transposons living?
Dude, no, come on. Oh my god. Like other mobile genetic elements such as transposons and retroposons. Oh, that have become part of a host genome. They contribute to the production of genetic variability. I can't. Oh my gosh. Furthermore, as genetic elements with an extracellular phase, they can serve as vehicles to transfer host genes horizontally between cells across species. However, none of these points can be used to show that viruses are alive. Taken together, their inability to self-sustain and self-replicate, their polyphyly, the cellular origin of their cell-like genes, and the volatility of their genomes through time make it impossible to incorporate viruses from the tree of life. Okay, I just want to say, okay, calm down, dude. I mean, I don't know if like the nature microbiology is a little. I mean,
that's not an accredited journal. No one can believe anything from Nature Microbiology.
No, I'm just saying. I'm like this team, these writers, like, dude, they put in the effort, dude. Abstract, main. This is like. How many paragraphs? 1, 2, 3, 4. One table. 5, 6, 7. Another image. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Another figure. 19, 20, 21, 22, 30. Like 35 paragraphs here. Like that they put in here. Look for the reasons to include now. The reasons to include now. This is the whole thing. This whole thing is what we just read through. This like figures, table, figure, all these things, and then look at the reasons to include the viruses on the tree of life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs. They just phoned it in, dude. They kind of phoned it in. I don't know. I'm kind of mad.
There was probably a word limit to the submission or something.
Oh, dude, look at the other one though, man. I mean, what were they? This is literally 7 times the size. I mean, it's like.
Hey, you picked the papers.
Oh my gosh, I just thought it was a little unfair, man. I don't know. They could have picked a team that. I don't know. When did it come out the same month?
They should have had the same team write both papers.
Oh, look at you. August 2009, March 2009. Oh my God, they had.
They refuted
months?
It. One of them, they read it, and then the other guys refuted it. So
oh my God, they had 6 months to prepare this, and they didn't. Oh my gosh, dude, that makes me mad.
Oh,
it's just a correspondence. Maybe that's how. It's just a correspondence. It's just a letter to the editor.
The first guys put out their article, the other ones responded. That's typical, but it's curious how many people agree with my point of view.
So the entire scientific community. Okay. Okay.
Well, okay. So there's a couple things that we've talked about that I didn't really think about before this conversation that are really resonating with me on it, and that's.
Are you coming over? Are you coming over to my side?
No, man. No, I'm backing up. I got even more evidence now for my side.
No.
Yeah, I think the idea that like the polyphyletic aspect, I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that, and that's huge, and that just tells me that viruses can evolve out of thin air, pretty much, and they can just show up and happen. And if there's a host that they can infect, then they will continue forward. And if there's not, then no one's ever going to know they evolved.
It's tough, man, because you have just like the origin. It's just they're not leaving any bones. You know what I mean? It's like this like hard. They have the genetic material. Right. We have the like endogenous retroviruses and stuff that actually put their genetic material inside of organisms. But yeah, there's not like a lineage that we can look in. It's not like vertebrates or something like that where it's kind of like stupid easy because they live calcification process or fossilification, I should say.
Here's a thought experiment, right? Let's really going off what I just said. Let's really zoom in on one single point in time, right? So, assuming what I'm saying is true, and that a virus can just evolve out of organic matter spontaneously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if there's a host, like I just said, and it can infect that host, it will propagate. And it will go on, and maybe it evolves to the point where, we're able to sequence it, right? Or maybe not, it dies off, leaves no fossil record, we never know it existed, whatever. But in that instantaneous moment where that virus pops into existence, before it was just scattered organic matter, now it is somewhat organized, and it doesn't have a host yet, is the point of time that we're looking at. Right? It exists. It doesn't have a host yet. It hasn't infected anything yet. It's right before that instance occurs. Is that life? Is that a living thing? Right? If it in some ways it depends on the outcome of the host. Right? It almost depends on. You're going to say, well, if it has a host, then it can infect it and it can propagate, and maybe it is living. But if it doesn't have a host, then it just disappears and goes away.
But like,
right?
I would see the evolutionary pressure being in that moment being for, like, again, it's a population of viruses that are evolving at this point. In your example, and it's the ones that are the most able to be parasitic with the most amount of hosts that win, that actually evolve and are able to spread their genes. There's going to be.
I'm just talking. I'm saying just focus on just that one instance where finally all the molecules come together and everything lines up, and you have what could be defined as an infectious virus.
Yeah.
This is a new entity. It's never infected a host.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying too, is there's going to be more than one of them, and there's going to be a population of them, and they're going to evolve, and the ones that have the different conformations in order to
wait, how do they evolve though?
They're going to evolve because that's how it is. That's genetic material.
They can't evolve because there's not a host yet.
Well, they're gonna probably, I don't know, maybe they'll evolve to infect each other. Maybe there's gonna be so much so you're saying before microbial life, right? Before microbial life.
No, this can be right now, today, right? A virus appears.
With so much microbial life, like why? I mean, why because
they're just not next. They're just physically not next to each other. They're on the wrong side of the planet. Let's say, right? A virus occurs where it's just like there's enough stuff that happens, and there's enough randomness that happens, and this little virus pops into existence, and it needs a host, but that perfect host is on the other side of the planet, so it's just never going to make it there, right?
Yeah, then it dies if it can't have a wider gamut of hosts that are available. Therefore, the evolutionary pressure is to infect as many hosts as possible. Like evolution.
But my question is before infection, before the initial infection.
Yeah.
That little particle, is that living?
I mean, yeah, because it's selected. It's susceptible to evolution, which is exactly what I'm arguing.
it's susceptible to evolution on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's either going to evolve or it's going to die. It's either going to infect
How's it
something
gonna?
or it's going
How's
to
it gonna?
die.
How? Okay, so
So maybe its perfect host is on the other side of the planet, but then it finds another susceptible host to infect, and it infects, and then it replicates, or it dies, or it evolves to be more self-sustaining and go into some type of, like, I don't know, the senescence stage or something like that, where it can like evolve to stay um
yeah, just
ready.
dormant.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something I was thinking about too, and I wasn't sure if viruses had that capability beyond like being frozen, because they don't have a life. They don't really have like a life cycle.
Yeah.
You're either like a whole virus or you've infected a cell, and you kind of kill yourself when you infect a cell as a virus, right? Because you're just
Huge commitment.
it's a big commitment. You're just like you're blowing your load into a cell, and that's it. You're now you're in the cell. It's not like you're outside the cell and in the cell. You're just like, right.
Well, it's a huge genetic bottleneck, right? It's the only cells that are going to be able to get in are the ones that are, capable of having
But
that.
and this is where my lack and our lack of understanding of all the viruses out there really weakens our ability to answer this question. But can you, or how long could a virus go without infecting a cell?
Yeah, that's a good question. How long can it
Right.
stay? I mean, RNA. I mean, I guess it'd matter on the type of virus, right? If it was a DNA virus, I assume it would be pretty long, man. Pretty long.
Yeah. I mean, are they highly susceptible to fluctuations in environmental pressures, temperature,
Sounds like an
yeah,
environmental
humidity?
speciation event. It sounds like an
Yeah, it's
abiotic.
like
That's which is evolution again, which is making my point.
But I see. Well, I don't think it's actually evolving. I think I think that's more in terms of just pure selection,
Well, that's what I
right?
mean. It's a bottleneck event. It's an abiotic bottleneck event that happens all the time.
Yeah, but wouldn't they all be genetically identical? Where would the mutation come from?
Which ones?
Wouldn't they?
The one that
The
spontaneously evolve.
whatever's going through the bottleneck, right? Wouldn't they all be genetically identical? Because there's no, even if one had a mutation, it had no way to replicate that mutation without a host. So how's it going to get through? How's it going to pass that evolutionary advantage onto daughter viruses
Hmm.
without a host?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
It's a
you could
weird
have
thing. It's a
you,
weird
you
thing
could
that's
have
happening with coronaviruses too. Like how they. I was reading a paper talking about the mutation rates and stuff like that, and it's like and also the evolution to actually like kill your host, and versus the ability to mutate is kind of like inversely correlated, because you want to be able to like mutate enough so that you can create all those genetic, because that's how you drive evolution. Obviously you want mutations, um, but then going to the next host is such an evolutionary bottleneck that it kind of impairs that process. So they're tied to one another, so that you can't just like be so accumulate so many mutations while you're inside the host that you can't get to the next host. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I could see that, sure.
Let's read this other one though. So let's see. These guys just phoned it in, man. I hate it. I love this. We read with interest the recent articles in Nature Reviews Microbiology with Maria and Lopez Garcia.
That's the other paper that
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Who, I love this, who courageously attempted
Courageously.
to, I love it, who
Wow.
courageously attempted to exclude viruses from the tree of life. Oh, it's so that's so good. The inability of viruses to self-sustain, self-replicate, their phylogenetic diversity, the origin of their cell-like genes and the instability of their genomes over time were established to strengthen the argument. However, as discussed in this correspondence, we emphasize that although we might not be able to call viruses pseudo-living entities or molecular parasites, we cannot deprive them of their status as living entities. Beautiful.
Mm.
Beautiful. Like
That's
a
that's a nice statement.
good writing is short, concise, and that's what they do
It's
here.
like a viral genome, right? It's like
Exactly. It's just like a viral genome. We cannot compare primitive organisms such as viruses with complex living entities such as plants and animals. In fact, because viruses are so, quote, monounitary organisms, the most plausible comparison would be with spermatozoa or ova. Can we expect either spermatozoa or ova to survive and replicate in their natural environment without any support? Definitely not. Interesting. I guess. Yeah, I mean, that's not that's interesting, but they're not living.
I haven't really heard that argument before. That is interesting.
Dude,
So they're saying that.
that is a real ethical thing, dude. Like,
So
is a
they're like,
sperm
is a sperm living?
Oh
Because
man.
if it doesn't find an egg, it dies.
Oh my god, that's such an interesting idea.
Okay. Well, okay, keep reading.
Okay, in fact, many of the cell types isolated from an organism cannot be sustained even when we provide the best in vitro environment for them to grow in. So true, we're a collection of cells, man, different types of cells. We're a collection of single cells.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take each of them out, they're not going to be able to do well by themselves. Therefore, the argument that viruses should be excluded from the tree of life because they cannot sustain themselves under natural conditions does not hold. Oh, this is kind of like this is like my parasitic argument. Also, quote, nature does not mean mere soil, light, and water. It includes all living entities, including plants and animals. Although viruses need hosts for survival and replication, we cannot argue that viruses will not survive in nature if we leave them alone, as hosts themselves are part of the continuum of nature. In fact, even animals and birds are not sustained in nature unless they can provide food for the other sources of life, that is, other plants or animals. Oh my God! Dunked! I should have just read this first. What am I talking about? That's so good. I mean, it's true. If you our host's argument trying to find it in order to replicate, it's like, well, you need to find food in order to replicate.
It's not exactly the same. It's not exactly the same because for a number of reasons, but the sperm and egg question, I'm still kind of thinking about.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's a philosophical thing where it's like, when does life begin? That's like, that's, I mean, you can...
Yeah, well, it's interesting because sperm and egg, at least, let's just talk about humans, right? Come from a living organism, but those cells themselves, do they meet all the requirements of our list of living organisms, right?
No,
like a sperm. I don't think they meet all of them.
Not even close.
A sperm can't self-replicate, right? I mean,
no.
Well, hold on, because
the only thing that I know that like an egg can do the X to X spermatogenesis.
I think this is the biggest difference, is that those cells contain the genetic information necessary to self-replicate. They just choose not to express those genes. So if you were to, put that sperm cell or egg cell into the proper environment and you were able to trigger those genes, I bet you can get them to self-replicate. Because they have that genetic material. Whereas a virus doesn't have that at all. It doesn't even have the possibility or the theoretical chance that it could self-replicate.
Well, I mean, there's also, I mean, Parthenogenesis, man. This is exactly what parthenogenesis is. Do you know about this? I'm sure you've heard about it.
I have. I can't read your page.
Yeah,
but
it's a natural form of asexual reproduction in which growth and development of embryos occur without fertilization by sperm. In animals, parthenogenesis means development of an embryo from an unfertilized egg. So in plants, parthenogenesis is a component, a process of. We're talking about vertebrates here. So they found this in, like, there's a species of New Mexican lizard. New Mexico. From a lizard in New Mexico that does just parthenogenesis. It's all females.
It's an all female population that lays eggs, and there's still meiosis when they make the egg, I guess. So
asexual reproduction. So the X chromosome that reproduces, it copies the X chromosome. It's crazy.
Is it still meiosis? It's still what's that show right there?
It is. It's
that looks like meiosis is still happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So are these living? Is this? It's really interesting.
So another one.
Komodo dragons. Holy! I had no idea Komodo dragons. Wow. There's.
Yeah, but those are all okay. Those are all living. We know those are living.
But it's just it goes to show in the highest form of animal. I say highest, but you know what I mean. Like
it's a vertebrate. It's got a brain, a spinal cord.
But this has been shown to happen in sharks. So that's kind of like
but I wouldn't say that. I think we have to think about this on the single cell level, right? Because viruses are not multicellular, so we can't even make any sort of comparisons to something multicellular. But that's why I like the comparison to a sperm or an egg, where it's like if you don't, it's very analogous to a virus not finding a host, right?
Yeah.
If a sperm doesn't find a host, it dies. It's useless, right?
Yeah.
I would refute that by saying that it contains the genetic material necessary to self-replicate. It's just not expressing it. And another example, very much in line with the sperm, is a seed, right? So if you have let's use an example of like a fruit seed, right? Take a peach pit, right? If you have a peach pit and you hold on to that and you desiccate it and you dry it and it, sits on your shelf for 100 years and hasn't done anything, is that seed living? All those years, is it living? It's just sitting there doing nothing. It's just a little stone, right?
Yeah, I guess it's just dormant. I don't know.
It's just dormant, and once you place it in the right environment, it still contains the information necessary to produce a living organism. It itself, this is the question: is a seed in the improper environment a living organism? It contains an information package in the form of DNA to produce a living organism, like a sperm.
It has to be considered living. There's no way.
Then I would say a sperm is living, even without. If a sperm is still destined to land,
But the difference is
not on an egg.
But the difference is that a seed has like an amount of like food and sustenance, and it's reproducing. It's going through S1, S2.
That's what an egg is, though. The egg is just the egg is the food, right? For the sperm, right? The sperm's going to go to the egg, and the egg's going to attach to the mother, and it's going to get the food, right?
But
if we're talking about humans, if we're talking about not humans, the egg literally is the food for most organisms, right?
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, you'd have to.
I think if you contain the genetic potential to become a living organism, you are a living organism, right? It's just a matter of expression. It just means that you have the wrong phenotype, right? But genetically, you have what it takes, and that goes back to our phylogenetic argument, which is, you can trace that through living organisms. You can trace that back to the beginning of life, like, the genes that are in sperm existed in the very first living organism because they're so fundamental to life, and those things are always going to be passed forward in living organisms.
Yeah.
But viruses don't have those.
Yeah, that's true. Interesting. Well, let's continue reading on here. Thought this was an interesting point too. A virus replication in the host means that viruses replicate in nature. So that kind of goes to your point a little bit. An interesting case is that of Sputnik. I had not heard of this. A recently described virus that exists inside another virus.
Oh, okay.
Acanthamybia phylogeny mimi virus. If a virus can live inside another virus, is the bigger virus similar to
Oh
a
my
host cell,
God.
or is it simply in a parasite within a parasite? Dude,
Goddamn,
that's
dude.
good. That is so.
That's a good one. I hadn't heard of that one
I've
before.
never heard of this.
Does it infect? They said Mimi virus, so I'm assuming it's a virus that infects a Mimi virus.
This must be what they were talking about.
I can't imagine that anything besides Mimi virus is getting
This
infected.
is it. Oh my God, this is it. This is what they were talking about. The virophage suggests viruses are alive. This is what it is.
It's a virophage. It's a virus.
A giant, I call it mama virus particles red, and satellite viruses of mama virus called Sputnik green. What, dude? That is crazy. Oh my God, I can't wait to read this paper. What? That is nuts. How did I not hear about this? That is so
Wait.
cool.
What year is that paper?
2008? Wow, dude. That is crazy. That was so long ago, too. I had no idea.
We got viruses infecting viruses.
Dude, that's really, I mean, that goes on to our whole thing about like being able to infect a host as an evolutionary event. You know, and like you're gonna have an evolutionary push to either remain dormant or to invade other things, including other viruses. Dang, that's really cool.
To me that still doesn't make it a living organism though, because it's adding one level of complexity, but in like the wrong direction, right? It's like just because you're the host doesn't mean you're living.
But it means that
I would need to know more.
The thing that's infecting it though is showing that it's able to adapt. It's not just like, oh, I need to find my host or I'm dead. It's like, no, I can do other viruses. I can do tons of different hosts. And it goes to the point that we were talking about earlier in the evolution of life. RNA viruses, did they have to how were they living before there was bacteria? Yeah, because they were infecting other viruses. That was probably RNA life was.
So what I would need clarification on is the virus that infects the virus, right? So virus A infects virus B.
Mm-hmm.
Does virus B make more of virus A immediately? Or does it have to wait until virus B infects a living host? You understand what I'm saying?
No, one more time.
So the smaller virus infects the bigger virus, right?
Yeah.
Does that big virus make more of the small virus? Or does that big virus first have to infect a host and then it makes both
that's
viruses?
An interesting point. I don't know, but I'll have to read that article.
We'll have to look at that and come back. My hunch is that it has to infect a host still, because if the small virus infects the big virus and got replicated, that means that the big virus now has the ability to replicate, which viruses don't have, right?
The Sputnik cannot multiply within the Acanthamybia castellina, but grows rapidly after an eclipse phase in the giant virus factory found in the amoeba co-infected with the APMV. Sputnik.
So it has to infect an amoeba.
Yeah, the Sputnik genome. Exactly.
Okay, so that's my point. It's going in the wrong direction on the spectrum. It's becoming it's not like it's a super virus. It's more like it's a mini virus, right? It's a small virus inside a big virus inside of a host, right?
Like one of those
So
nesting dolls.
it's one of those nesting dolls. So the small virus is still a virus. The big virus is still a virus. Both of them are useless and lifeless without a host.
Interesting. This is really they go on to talk about the phylolytic argument here. This is kind of interesting. Pathogen recognition patterns such as toll-like receptors are common features of all living organisms, including plants. In addition, toll-related proteins of plants recognize viruses. The fact that plants evolved millions of years before animals suggests that ever since the origin of life, living organisms have confronted viruses. We think that the argument about the polyphyletic features of viruses is not strong. Lopez Garcia agree that viruses evolved much faster than bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. We argue that if organisms evolved equally fast, nature would contain a lot more species of life forms. Therefore, because the evolution of viruses is rapid in comparative terms, it makes sense for viruses to be polyphyletic.
Okay.
So kind of talking about what you're talking about there before. It is well known that all living organisms follow Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest. Those organisms that cannot... Oh, man, they're making my point. They're going to slam dunk here. Watch out. These organisms cannot adapt to a particular condition become extinct. However, non-living objects do not follow this theory. Rocks don't evolve. If viruses are non-living entities, then they should not have the ability to adapt to a particular condition. However, most viruses, including human HIV viruses, undergo constant mutations, thereby changing their phenotype characters to sustain themselves in the environment. It's only 2 more paragraphs.
That's their argument is that rocks don't evolve, therefore a virus isn't a rock.
No, but I mean it's a good point, man. Like, I mean, what's the biggest thing in biology? It's evolution. That's the thing that links everything together. That's the single thing that links everything together. So in order for viruses to be living, they have to evolve. They have to, and they do. Not all things that evolve are necessarily alive. For example, those proteins.
Sure, and I guess a rock doesn't evolve. A rock changes, but it doesn't evolve.
Mm-hmm. Evolution of viruses is most often driven by the host. Of particular interest is immune evasion by viruses, as best illustrated by the case of the herpesvirus. These viruses are highly species-specific. Accordingly, there's often a phylogenetic distinction in the functions encoded by the herpes genome virus to evade immune responses. They're going into the how they do it. However, it could still be argued that viruses adapted following speciation, and that there would be no evolution if there were no environmental pressure.
Yeah,
but we are not taught in classical evolutionary biology that change or adaptation is due to the environment. But that's a question. But are we not taught in classical evolutionary biology that the change or adaptation is due to the environment? And that the cases of viruses, the environment is the body, its systems, and its cells. Furthermore, most successful viruses either need to survive in the host for a long time by evading the immune system, or need to change rapidly to keep up with the immune system. Yeah, I mean it's evolving to biotic. The virus evading the immune system is its own biotic evolutionary driver that it's reacting to. It's the environment that it's just like how we as mammals are subject to biotic pressures for speciation. They're doing the same thing.
Did they say? So, I feel like I got to go back and read that again myself. But I thought you said that. No, I got to go back and read that myself.
Okay.
That was a lot that you said, and I want to dig further into that
They're
before
talking
making a
about the
comment.
evolutionary. They're basically evolution by the viruses, and they're saying that the particular. They're just saying that like the immune system that the host has is similar to the biotic pressures that exist in nature that other organisms have to face.
Yeah, I get that. I thought you said something to the contrary of that, though. Um, but I understand that analogy that they're drawing there. Um,
I think this is what you're talking about. However, it could still be argued that viruses adapted following speciation, and that there would be no evolution if there were no evolutionary pressure.
right.
Hmm.
There
Following.
needs. Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there needs to be some pressure. There needs to be some reason to evolve, and some way to select, and
It does. I mean, they react to it. Here we go. This is the final paragraph. Unlike the physical and chemical sciences, life sciences is not always foolproof. Oh, that's beautiful, dude. Isn't that true? Isn't that true?
very so true, so true.
I had when I first went to grad school, I had a bunch of like chemists in my ear talking about how it's like only physics and chemistry is a real hard science, not biology. And you're just like, it's true, man. Life science, there is a
It's
black
true.
box. I mean, there is a black box in biology. It's like it
Yeah,
is true. Welcome to synthetic biology, trying to remove that. You know, don't get pissed at it. Join the
right,
cause. It's like,
right. Yeah, there's very few universal laws.
yeah, man. I mean, that's one of the
Yeah.
cool things I think about it. I still obviously see biology as a hard science, but yeah, that's a great way to put it. Life science is not always foolproof. The central dogma of replication, DNA to RNA to protein, is itself under scrutiny. Some RNA viruses, such as orthomyxoviruses and paramyxoviruses and picorinaviruses, can directly replicate their RNA without being converted into DNA, whereas prions are proteins and lack nucleic acids but can replicate directly.
Mhm.
Lopez Garcia drew an analogy with the computer virus. However, this is stretching the argument too far, as computer viruses are not chemical or biological entities. Boom. That's so true.
Refuted.
So
Yeah.
true. And to include plasmids in the same league as viruses is also wrong. Thank you.
Oh, I was thinking about the plasmid argument as well. I forgot to
Oh,
bring that up earlier.
oh my God. Plasmids neither actively enter cells nor are composed of proteins. Life itself is derived from the assembly of non living things, nucleic acids, and proteins. How far do we go to define the tree of life? Does it start only from the primordial cell or does it go further back? Beautiful. All right, man.
Wait, in their last statement there, does it go further back?
Yeah,
Does that mean they're inferring viruses existed prior to host cells?
exactly, dude. That's a great
I
question.
think
I
it
think so.
does.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it does.
It does.
I
Yeah.
honestly like I have not really considered this before this conversation, but now I think that viruses existed first, and I just don't think there were host cells for them to latch onto.
So then that's the origin of life then. Viruses.
No,
Damn it.
no, because they're not
Damn
living.
it.
They're not living. You're not gonna trick me. No, they're still not living, because that's the thing. Because that's why I bet on some planet somewhere, not Earth, where there isn't life yet, there's just viruses that it's like, boom, here's a virus, no host. Okay, sorry, I'm gone. Here's a new virus, no host. Sorry, I'm gone.
Hmm.
And they're just gonna keep going and keep popping up and
But we
going
were
away
just talking about
until
that they can
until
infect
life
each
comes
other.
along.
But they can
Hmm?
infect one another. They can
But they
infect one
can't.
another.
Doesn't matter. They can't replicate. The thing they infect can't replicate. We clarified that.
No, some are they just talking about that they can directly replicate their RNA without being converted into DNA. They can.
They can they replicate the entire virus though, or just the RNA?
I don't know. I've never seen these. I feel like such a bad microbiologist not knowing all these, but it's really interesting.
It's not your or mine area of expertise. It's extremely
It's
complex.
virology is gnarly, dude. It is
Yeah,
crazy.
it's very like it's not trying to say neither of us or we're both extremely ill versed in those areas.
Oh yeah. How? I mean, it's just really. Oh man.
I think that thing. I think that was saying that they were able to replicate a portion of their entity, not all of it, right? Because they're not the things that are making the things that are replicating the RNAs are not replicating protein portions of the cell, and there's still a protein portion, right? It's not just RNA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm looking at it right now. The Wikipedia. All right. Well, man, I think that I'm glad that we covered that virophage the paper that I saw. That was actually on my list to go through, so that was cool to go through that. And I think if anyone's interested at this point, I want to kind of later a newer paper that's come out talking about this, a phylogenomic data-driven exploration of viral origins and evolution. I think this is like one of the latest papers that's arguing that viruses are and should be considered living. So kind of like it's still a debate, you know. Like I think that's one of the cool things is that
it's always going to be a debate.
Yeah,
it's always going to be there. This is the thing. It's like because there is no genetic marker to show you that there's been progressive evolution from a single ancestor, it's always going to be an open debate.
Oh, here, interesting. Even this paper even has evolutionary relationships between cells and viruses. Oh, damn! So this is really investigating that claim that the paper was talking about, kind of like a phylogenomic, you know.
Yeah, so it looks like they're correlating with when certain viruses arise as other things evolve. So that goes back to the statement before about as new species evolve, new viruses will evolve.
Yeah. Well, this is in Science Advances, so anyone that wants to read it is I'm probably going to do it afterwards, but so thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Anything else you wanted to say before we stop?
Well, where do we stand? What's the scoreboard? What's Did I convince you? Did you convince me?
I think I've made some. I think these guys in the short and just like the creme de la creme of those 6 paragraphs really brought me back. I was on the ropes there for a little bit.
All right, I'll give you. I'm going to give you the last word. So I'll pick my my top 3 things from tonight.
Okay.
And that's so I didn't know about the phylogenetic aspect of it, right?
Yeah,
that's my background, right? So I'm an evolutionary biologist, and I didn't know that that there was no single gene shared amongst any viruses, and that's number one to me. That's a really surprising fact to learn, and speaks to my new hypothesis that viruses in a simple form can spontaneously generate out of organic matter similar to a primordial soup. And if there's a host available, they could then latch onto that and then evolve into something more sophisticated. And my last point is that they can't. I think the self-replication for me is the thing that I get most hung up on when we're answering the question of is it life or not, because we use the parasite example or the sperm example, and those things theoretically could self-replicate because they have the genetic capacity to do so, whereas a virus doesn't have the it doesn't have that code. It doesn't even have the theoretical potential to self-replicate, right? Whereas something else might on the outside look like it can't self-replicate, but it does have that possibility, right? So those are my three big takeaways. The phylogenetics, the evolution of them, and the self-replication.
Mhm.
So I'll let you have the last word here, Greg.
Yeah, man, I don't know what to say. I think, yeah, that the shared no shared gene was very surprising to me. That was really interesting. Also, the fact that like a virus can infect another virus was really really. But then the fact that it happened with that Mimi virus wasn't. It is, looking back, it's actually not that surprising. I guess of all of the ones that I would expect that would to be the one. Um, I don't think I think like I guess um, viruses just have such a like an interesting way of adapting, and it's just such an interesting way. Like life evolves so interesting. Like there's so many different life strategies and so many reproductive strategies like that happen in biology that it's just not surprising to me that something so small would be something so nimble. And and it's just so sad that we might never know. The
Yeah,
the origins. Like there's no skeletal record for us to look at.
right.
And really the genes and the DNA would or the genomes would be the only way to actually know. And it doesn't look like that's going to be something. So I think I'm just really excited. I don't know, man. I think that microbiology is honestly like such a cool subject, and the fact that it's such a there's so much that we're learning from it, and the fact that we can there's so much discovery left. You'd think that this is a single celled organism. Of course we're gonna figure out like everything that we need to know about that, and it's like pretty much the complete opposite. I feel like there's more mystery in like viral evolution for me than like human evolution, I guess, because we kind of that stuff is we have the bones, we know it, and we might
Right,
not know like how the
right.
brain works and stuff like that. That's kind of like a
But
its own little
we know where
thing.
we came from, at least.
Yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
evolution, I should say, the evolutionary aspects of like humans is kind of
Mhm.
boring for me, but like the as an evolutionary biologist too, like the just thinking of like the all the stuff for viruses and how they came to be, and it's just so cool, and it's so fast paced, and it's happened so quickly. Um, it's just what you're talking about makes me think about like how I wonder how many viruses are like evolving like now, whatever, or on top of that, like with the permafrost melting and all that kind of stuff, what kind of
Right.
viruses are going to recombine, and what are we going to get afterwards? Like, holy moly,
Yeah.
that's going to
Yeah.
be so.
I mean, there's one thing for certain, and that's there's never going to be life without viruses.
Hmm. And it really makes me wonder, like, could we take the I don't know, like, could it, like one, it makes me kind of like scared, I guess, for like a bio weapon or a bio terrorist, like viral evolution kind of thing. If it can be a problem in the future, but like what tools are going to be made in science to harness that like quick evolutionary ability for from viruses and like a beneficial or positive impact. That would be really interesting. Um, Especially with the pandemic, we've seen how quickly they've kind of like all it spreads so asymptomatically. Like, what if there was one that
Sure.
was like turning off
That,
or regulating the obesity genes or something like that, where now we're not
mhm.
having 500,000 people die every year from heart disease or something like that. It's
I
like,
mean, isn't that kind of a pretty common practice in molecular biology is using like a viral promoter or something to drive something because it's so efficient.
Yeah, but I guess I kind of like I'm thinking more in the terms of like viral nanotechnology. It's kind of like a dead field. Like when I was doing research
Mm,
on it, it kind of like stopped being a thing in 2010 around there, where people were actually
mm.
trying to create like nanoparticles and nanotechnology that mimicked viruses and that kind of stuff. And you're kind of, I mean, if you thought the replication problem was hard with viruses, like once you get
Yeah.
to nanotechnology, now it's even harder because it's like,
Good luck with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a couple like
Uh,
bacterias that like produce nanoparticles magnetically for aligning to poles and making different colors, and that then for different abilities to deal with different toxins and all that kind of stuff from light damage. But making complex nanoparticles is really tough. So I mean, viruses, their ability and how complex they are with how just how little starting material it is. It's just fascinating to me. Um,
Super
so
efficient. Super
I know
efficient.
it's crazy,
Hmm.
man. It's
Hmm.
so cool. All right, well, man, I really appreciate having you on, and it was really fun discussion. So, um,
Yeah. This is yeah, it sounds like it's a draw.
I'm not backing down. I'm not
You're not
backing down.
backing down. You're
No,
not backing down.
if anything, I feel like viruses are even more cool now. So I definitely want
I
to
mean,
bring them
they're
on.
they're certainly, yeah, no, certainly interesting. Certainly interesting. It's going to give me a lot to think about, and I don't think my mind will be changed, but I definitely learned a lot. So I appreciate you having me on here talk about this. It was really really awesome to have the conversation and learn some new stuff, and you know talk about it and try and think about it in some different perspectives.
Cool,
So I
man.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
let's do another one in the future, and we'll be in talks, and it'll be yeah. I want to do something with like technology for climate change or something like that, or how we can. That's something that I think that like a scientific discussion on is kind of needed. Not whether or not it exists or not, but actually like what do we do next, and what can we actually um,
Certainly.
yeah, because I know we have some different agreements on that one too. So
Always, right?
yeah,
Gotta
yeah,
keep the
man,
conversation going and
yeah, dude,
keep contesting each other.
exactly. That's
Uh,
where it's fun. All right, sweet man.
that's the peer review.
There it is. There it is, dude. All right, thanks, man. Have a good one.
You too. Good night.